Are you keeping the fluorescent on in the back too?
Yeah.
Why that?
Ask Joe.
If that's the answer, I'm not going to pursue.
I'm just like,
that.
I guess that's the cumulative experience.
Okay.
I have no idea.
I'm not a dissenter.
Okay.
How are you? All right. Well, while people are getting organized here, I will say, please, if you have cellular devices, shut them off or silence them. Give Nicolle her rightful due of being up here without being interrupted. So thanks everybody for coming out this evening. It's great to see a full house. It's nice to see you again. And we really want to thank the committee, Juan Granados, Guy, I will not try to murder your last name, Will Canyon, helping Nicolle through this adventure. You know, this lecture is partial fulfillment of the MFA, as we've all kind of gotten used to. So she will give her lecture, then at the end, we will give her a round of applause probably, and then we'll have 10 minutes of Q&A from the audience, and then I will probably blow a whistle or something, and then let you thank her and congratulate her on maybe passing, and then we will ask everybody to leave, and I'll ask the MFA faculty to stick around, and we will do our oral exams with her after that. One other thing, we do have another lecture this week. I think Marissa's the only other one this week, is that correct? Thursday night at 7, if you can make it. That's another good one, so please be there. So a little bit about Nicolle. She comes to us from Wisconsin. I'm not sure I said that right. But she got her BFA from the University of Wisconsin in Whitewater in 2011. She's been very active in the pursuit of grants, exhibitions, visiting artists, residency opportunities. She applied for a Fulbright to Sweden, and we're keeping the fingers crossed on that. Her artwork is currently in the final round of the NCCA's Juried Student Exhibition. If you don't know what NCCA is, that's our biggest clay conference in the nation. So she's made it through all the first cuts. She's in the last round. We're going to see what happens. Again, keeping our fingers crossed. So she also has served as the MFA Graduate Student Coordinator for the past year. Bless you.
Excuse me.
She's been involved in a number of workshops. There's just, I tried to narrow it down, and I got down to 5 pages, so I'm not going to go through all of it, but she's done a number of workshops at Penland in 2012, 2013, 2014. She's been at Aeromont 2013, 2015, 2016, also as a studio assistant during those times. I could list off the impressive names of people she's worked with there, but I will kind of digress on that. She's gotten many awards, the Richard and Sybil Dickey Art Scholarship, the Helen DeWitt Jones Talent-Based Scholarship. She's got an NCCA Graduate Student Fellowship, a Lott Endowment for Excellence in Visual Arts. She's got the Ken Little Scholarship. It keeps going, folks. Many exhibitions, too, as if there wasn't enough that she was doing already. She most recently has been in the Louisiana Biennial, and 12 by 12 at Charles Adams, the Warehouse, Collaborate, Clay on Everything, Patent Pending, Temporary Sculpture Garden. That was just 2015. You just did the West Texas, I forget what it was called.
West Far West.
West Far West. Then there's, it goes on and on. So she's done a very good job of doing what we expect of a grad student. So I will say, without further ado, please welcome Nicolle LaMere.
Thank you everyone for coming out tonight. I really appreciate your time and your attention. It's been a really long journey, so it's really great so I can share this with everyone. I would also like to take a moment to thank Juan, Guy, and Will for serving as my committee members to help me through this process. Thank you also to my friends and family. Of course, we can't get anywhere without a support network, and also countless mentors that I've met along the way. So thank you. As written in chapter 4 of Lao Tzu, the way is like an empty vessel that yet may be drawn from without ever needing to be filled. It is bottomless, the very progenitor of all things in the world. In it, all sharpness is blunted, all tangles untied, all glare tempered, all dust soothed. It is like a deep pool that never dries. Was it too the child of something else? We cannot tell. But as a substanceless image, it existed before the ancestor. I have asked a question I cannot answer. I am asking the question in its most simplistic terms. How does one live an authentic life? The answers to this question become even more complex when an individual considers the possibility of a non-corporeal self. People have both asked and answered this question in various ways. Some believe systems postulate means to authenticity via enlightenment or salvation. For those who do not believe there is an afterlife, life is simply time before death. In this respect, individuals look towards science and the natural world to find authenticity. I am not interested in investigating religions, passing judgment, or finding the one truth. I am interested in the essential nature of being and how to live an authentic life. Authenticity is often impeded by perceived differences, which lead individuals to believe in their own isolation. In order to live an authentic life, one must strip away trivialities and discover interconnectivity through our shared experience of the nothing, the void, the death. In Martin Heidegger's 1950 essay, The Thing, the potter is used as an example to explain the void in understandable terms. It is not the clay on the wheel that the artist manipulates which holds the importance, but the void in which the walls of the clay create. Vessels are containers of voids. The vessel I create are not made to consume from, but invitations to contemplate the nothingness. Artworks created in response to my personal questioning revolves around relationships between permanence and impermanence, the potential changes in a viewer's personal experience via participating or observing the manipulation of objects and environments, and the ideas pertaining to our corporeal passage through time. My work is the embodiment of the active questioning of a cognizant being in disjunction with nature of existence. My intent as an artist is to draw attention to the relationships between formed objects, environment, and the accessor while utilizing nature as my natural guide. During the 2016 scholarly lecture by Dr. Carolyn E. Boyd on the White Shaman mural at Texas Tech University, Dr. Boyd simply stated, "Myth informs ritual." With this simple statement, I gained an instantaneous understanding and respect for those words and the implications it has on my artistic practice. The mural is a creation narrative. Scholars believe that the White Shaman mural depicts the creation of light in the sky through the willing sacrifice by a sacred deer, otherwise depicted as a small child. It is also believed that a group of people in Central America still perform this pilgrimage and ritual to ensure the light remains in the sky. For me, to engage in ritual is to perform a set of systematic actions with desired results, especially in the alteration of non-tangible variables. Objects that result from ritual are relics. Therefore, I view the artworks I create through the lens of reliquary. If I am indeed the maker of relics, one must ask, what is the myth and where does it originate? To understand my personal mythos, I look to my memory, my roots, my origin story. Verona, Wisconsin, otherwise known as Hometown, USA, is a small town roughly 10 miles southwest of Wisconsin's capital. Predominantly white middle-class suburbanites live here. I also lived there. Growing up in this tiny town could only be described as experiencing a childhood fluctuating between wanton neglect and unbridled freedom. When I was 5, my parents divorced and my father was awarded primary custody. My father's approach to rearing children was mainly hands-off, which was compounded when I was gifted my very first bike. The moment my training wheels were removed, I discovered the joys of off-roading. Forests, streams, marshes, and prairies. I traversed them all in a blissful solitude. I approached these spaces as sources of sanctuary and a place of healing. As a child, I only left these spaces when I felt emotionally and spiritually fortified. Time and again, I would enter into these engulfing spaces as a space of rewombing, a space where I could feel reconnected with something greater than myself. Particular times of day would highlight ecosystems where creatures were most active, or when the light of the sun or the moon would illuminate the inherent beauty of each space. My choices were influenced by the greatest potential for experiencing the interconnectivity between the transcendental and the temporal. My recent series, Echo of Footfall, is the physical compression of dirt and water by hand only. The surface is achieved by burnishing with a kitchen spoon and polishing with a terry cloth hand towel. Dirt samples are collected upon the returning to these spaces. As time progresses, my memories increase, ergo, so does the series. Moving meditation increases the interconnectivity between the material of these places and the associated memory. Developing an appreciation and mindfulness pertaining to my environment furthered my personal understanding of growth and entropy and the way in which all things share a bilateral relationship of influence. Paper bowl encompasses the embryonic and the degenerative, as the ceramic vessel is frozen in form, but pulses with an inner illumination. As I aged, so did my loved ones. During my early teens and 20s, I bore witness to the death of multiple family members. Though I had spent my childhood observing my surroundings, which is in all times in a constant state of growth, decay, and death, I was unprepared for the depth in feelings of loss. As a young person, it took time to understand that only through death can we truly possess what is external from ourselves via the living memory. Within the memory experienced through my own perception, they are reborn. But what I possess is no longer their true self. Grief over the loss of their corporeal selves propelled feelings of desperation and anxiety for the preservation of life. This in turn greatly affected artwork from my late teens onward. The work I made after my undergraduate studies in particular, were created from a deep desire to conquer death, destroy the symbols of death, to preserve a living memory. Utilizing the figure of the crow as the symbolic harbinger of death and destruction to come, I propagated images of dead crows. The laborious nature of producing hand-carved, hand-printed multiples would exhaust my body, sending my mind into a meditative state. The clarity repetition afforded me a greater understanding of what it means to personally incite a symbol and the caution one must exert in doing so. I relied on culturally accepted symbols rather than a symbol from my personal mythos. I never returned to that series. After living in Wisconsin for 26 years, I packed up everything I owned. I moved down to Lubbock, Texas. The journey from the Midwest to my new home in West Texas transitioned me from a landscape that envelops to one that exposes a person. In this place, red and golden flat plains are met on a distant horizon by an ever-expanding blue sky. I felt separated from the landscape. I was now a feature on, rather than of, the land. My desire to express the temporal nature of being remained. However, I began to question the relationship between materials and environment. When talking about creative endeavors, many artists speak about the importance of process in their work. This may entail the way in which something was made or the change that material itself experiences. I am interested in the process of these vessels becoming, their state of being, and their movement towards unbecoming and ultimate obliteration. Considering my earlier artworks, this act of destruction had historically been left to happenstance. But to explore this cyclical process further, mechanisms of decay were introduced. As described in Serendipity, the constant sound and visuals of churning ceramic shards activates a sensorial experience of accelerated grinding of ceramic to dust. Kinetics piece Illume draws attention not only to the interaction between the mechanism and the ceramic shards, but also the space in between the shards as it is illuminated from below. Ceramic shards obstruct the viewer's access to the inner illumination. Motors too have lifespans. When the mechanisms of decay cease to be, the shards are returned to the pace of eventual unbecoming that spans a greater time than our lifespan. Dissipation is a formative artwork in which I utilize objects in a ritualistic performance piece. Underfired ceramic vessels are delicately carried to a waiting pool of water. Once introduced, they sank to the bottom, disintegrating in an explosive manner, obliterating any form they held. More than anything, this was an exercise in letting go. Mori is a small wall shrine containing a looping video of disintegrating vessels. Placed atop the shrine are 2 piles of black silica carbide sand. One pile supports a vessel, while the other only registers the absence of what was once there. The presence of the object informs the loss of the other, while the video described the unbecoming in direct terms. It is impossible to understand what another sees and comprehends. Even so, this piece is intended to remind viewers of their corporeal selves while engaging in the nothing to promote moments of authenticity. Burnt Offerings is a viewer-performative piece in which participants select a vessel from a shelf to introduce to a tall glass tank of water. These under-fire vessels slowly reabsorb water as they fall to the bottom. As they land on the bottom, they add to the collective layers of sedimentary decay. The vessels are the representation of our perceived disconnect between ourselves and the external. When the viewer willingly destroys the physical manifestation of their burden, the object is recontextualized as it is absorbed in the participant's living memory. Counter to objects losing their corporeality, Segmented Deposit features hundreds of fired ceramic vessels buried under layers of unfired clay. Over time and exposure to the elements, the vessels emerge, revealing the once hidden mass. The installation of this piece resulted in an extended period of time working in one particular space. As I looked around, I began to see the potential in utilizing elements from the surrounding environment as active voices in my artworks. I found inspiration from artist Wolfgang Leib. He creates with matter collected from his surroundings rather than manufactured materials. Pollen and beeswax, milk and stone. These materials speak to the temporal and everlasting alike. Milkstone highlights this relationship when the fluidity of the milk meets the marble slab. Gathered Offerings also utilizes objects derived from the surrounding environment, enhanced by the visual power of multiples of hundreds of vessels are balanced within the winding branches of the tumbleweed. The tumbleweed, otherwise known as Russian sage, is a common entity of West Texas. Tumbleweeds are particular in the fact that to spread its seed, it must tumble. In order for it to tumble, it must end its own life by detaching itself from its own roots. Because of death, there is life. The vessels adorning the tumbleweed remain empty as a void container for contemplation. The Dissemination series is a pairing of the vessel and the porcelain cast tumbleweed remnants. These portable relics are carriers of memory as the weighty terracotta containers ground the temporal components. Remnants encompasses a fired ball of carbonized paper resting next to a pure white vessel. These actively highlights the relationship between the mass and the void, between the absence and presence of light. The porcelain tumbleweed remnants take on a visceral quality, appearing as though they are tiny bones stained blood red. They are placed upon a shallow edge, which references the precarious embodied reality. Potentiation once again combines the mass and the void. However, from the vessel, a dehydrated symbiotic colony of bacteria and yeast, or more commonly known as the SCOBY, is peeling itself away from the surface of the void. It is at all times connected to the void as an embodied SCOBY reaches towards the light. It is not flesh. It is not fat. It is the body in its entirety. It is alive. Marina Abramovich is a well-known performance artist who views body as mediums to communicate and create artworks. During Abramovich's 2010 retrospective at the MoMA, the viewer performative piece, The Artist is Present, invites visitors to sit in a chair directly across from Abramovich. While sitting in this chair, complete attention expressed through unwavering eye contact would commence. As the viewer would get up to leave, Abramovich would close her eyes, waiting for the next visitor to take a seat. This act is repeated in a systematic, ritualistic manner. The negation of spoken word enables a heightened bodily connection, resulting in a shared, intangible experience. The significance in silence and the embodied experience is present in my work as I formulate objects and environments created through ritualistic behaviors which intangibly act upon the viewer. Presence was a direct question to the active disembodiment of embodied objects. What appears to be a chair covered in fabric is in reality a hand-formed paper pulp sheet. While the paper was malleable, I draped it over the chair, which I later removed once the paper was rigid and self-supporting. The absence of the chair, as well as the absence of the body, implicates the relationship between the bodily presence of the viewer and the understood use of the chair under the context of a defined space. Work in process is an installation expressing an active ritual as it is continually being built upon. The viewer is not informed of the intended results of the ritualistic act, rather that it only implies a continuance of accumulation. Broken Connection, How to Cast a Circle in 10 Easy Steps, consists of formed and fabricated elements inspired by the ritual of casting a salt circle of protection. The centralized figure is an amalgamation of a handmade paper pulp shroud, sage harvested from a plant I pass through daily, and a coyote pelvis sourced locally. These objects collectively become a stand-in for my body so that I may leave this area yet remain protected. Visitors are also allowed to enter into the circle of protection, becoming active participants in the ritual. I've put myself in the place of the white shaman. As the centralized figure in my own creation narrative, I accept the various systems of belief. Be it religious or otherwise, as facets of understanding the essential nature of being. Through my engagement with ritualistic practices, I am creating opportunities for shared exploration of commonalities. As written in chapter 40 of Lao Tzu, in Tao, the only motion is returning. The only useful quality, weakness. For though all creatures under heaven are products of being, being itself is the product of not being. In life, the one thing we share is our connection with our corporeal movement through time towards our rejoining the void. Through art, we are able to recontextualize prodigious realities to realize our interconnectivity, thus enabling ourselves to live an authentic life. Thank you. I would now like to open it up for question and answer session.
Thank you for your presentation, Nicole. Thank you for your presentation.
It's like, what?
My question is, what is ritual to you? How do you explain or define ritual? What does that mean for you?
Sure.
Yeah.
People think of, okay, so ritual is systematic behavior that is done over and over again to produce a specific result. For me, when I'm engaging in ritual, I am trying to peel back these layers to try and find what it means to live an interconnected life, an authentic life, and that has a lot to do with looking to the natural world. So I think in terms of why I'm engaging with ritual is because I'm still trying to also understand my own myth, and through doing these behaviors, that's sort of bringing to light what that is exactly.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks.
So in your presentation, you talked a lot about these kind of binaries between internal, external, mass and void. I'm curious how you see your artwork interacting between the binaries. Is it more of like a transitional, like you want to show a transition? Is it more of like a unknown floating stasis in between? I'm just curious about what you think about that.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
So are you asking in particular about the binaries that exist within the objects and environment, or the binaries between the viewer and the work, or?
I'm thinking about the binaries between the words that you use in your presentation. So like, does your work stand in between this absence and presence? Do you want it to show the transition between the two?
I think when I'm like packaging everything in as the binary together, is supposed to be all-encompassing. So when you have mass and void, when they're together, it's the everything. It's the Dasein. It's all things. Did I answer your question? Or?
Yeah.
You return to ceramics and cast or formed paper in your works, and that relates really well to the concepts that you were talking about of permanence and impermanence and the rate at which things decay. Why did you pick those materials over other materials with the same properties, like a metal that could oxidize, or a rock, or a piece of wood or bone, or photography for that matter?
I think in all pieces that I'm working on, I start from scratch. I always ask the question, does it need to be ceramic, and if not, why? If it needs to be something else, what is that material? And I'm always constantly trying to find what suits that piece at the time. I know I like to do, I use these elements together quite often. I have more of a natural affinity towards ceramic, the ceramic material itself. There's something about metal, especially iron, that's connecting more for a bodily reference for me, though because it's more permanent, I tend to shy away from that. I'm sorry, it was a long question. Is there another, I want to make sure I answer it completely for you, but if I'm using something that's a found object like a bone, or perhaps sticks or something like that, I'm always very conscious of the life they lived before coming into my hands, and I acknowledge the fact that, you know, bones come from living things, and they had their life, and if I'm going to use that, it has to be in a very specific manner.
Thank you.
I'm going to go with Geet. Fine, I'll go with Harrison.
When you mention ritual, is the background of where it comes from important to your work?
It is.
Because you mentioned a few different
Yeah.
kind of cross-cultural things. There's Native American, there's some Japanese, there's other things. You know, you talk about the Midwest a little bit. How does that influence where you're going with some of the pieces? And
Right.
maybe I'm interested more in, it was very early in the presentation, the Japanese mud balls, the Doridongos.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by those, I don't know why, but yeah, is the background of these specific objects or rituals important to your final product, or is it just a means to approach it?
When the when the specificity of where the ritual is coming from, when that is important, I try to make sure that I give some sort of visual clues for the viewer. Such as when my most recent piece, How to Cast a Circle in 10 Easy Steps, that was a direct reference to the ceremony of casting a salt circle. However, some of the imagery and placement was also influenced by research I've been doing lately concerning the Winnebago tribe up in Wisconsin. After going home over the summer, that was something that I became really interested in. One of my ancestors actually wrote a book, The Winnebago Stories. So it's talking about a part of my history that I'm not as fully aware of, but I'm interested in like digging back into that. So in some cases, the historical reference is very important because it's very personal to me, and it's very, even though it seems like I'm just like wrapping up all these things into one tight bundle, it's very selective in what I'm choosing. But these dirt balls, those I'm still working on at this point, and I'm learning more and more about the history of those as I go on. And we can talk about it later if you'd like. Okay.
Since you're talking about that piece, the title of it is what moves me to this question, which is there's a humor in the way that you've named it, which makes it seem like it's possible to research such a thing, you know, as someone remote to the actual experience of conducting this ritual, you know, today or something. Like I could Google it and I could find perhaps how to cast a salt circle in 10 easy steps. And I think the tone of it makes me ask, how sincere is your faith that the circle works? I can't tell what your belief is in the powers or capacities of the rituals that you're conducting, especially one like that that's so quoting a lot of sort of coded, marked spiritual objects like that. Do you believe in this? Does that matter?
I don't know if, I think because it's a culturally accepted symbol, the salt circle, like you said, like you can Google it. I did Google it. I think that creates some sort of understanding of if they're curious, they can look about it. Otherwise, it's starting off with this basis of a ritualistic practice that has roots in, I don't want to necessarily say pagan, but like the Earth Mother sort of vein of practice. Do I think that I'm casting spells? No. No, I don't. But do other people? That's the question. I understand that my intent isn't necessarily to scare other people, but it is to have them actively question and also participate in what they see as ritual.
Can I follow up on that just
Sure.
once? Is you, I can't remember your precise phrasing, but something about inviting them into the circle of protection. Do you intend or wish upon the viewer to garner a feeling of protection just by being enclosed by the circle? Like, even if we were to strip away the magic, but just something normal? I don't know. Your phrasing there is something, in addition to the questioning that
Right.
I'm hearing, I'm interested in what you do want them to feel. It seems like you're informing them of protection.
I'd like people to perhaps think about what ritual means for them, whether or not they're choosing to believe in that. And if they do, hopefully they're believers in that, and then they would feel some sort of protection or understanding of that ritual and how that would affect them. But it is really recent, and I'm finding, especially after this past First Friday and watching people interact with it, there's more fear than anything.
Thank you.
Did you feel protected? How did you feel protected or not protected?
I think the act of doing it, even if I didn't necessarily feel like the salt circle was doing the protecting, I felt as though perhaps I was doing something that was fulfilling for me in that act. If anything else, it kind of like pushed some people away, which of course in that isolation does create that feeling of protection. So I don't.
Have you considered making them in different places other than just West Texas? Because I think you'll find that they would have different, with a different audience, they're going to have a different feel, and that fear might be something else or a different kind of connection because of the audience and the location.
I was actually having a conversation about this recently where rituals such as like celebratory things for Day of the Dead, we don't really do that in Wisconsin. That's not really like something that's practiced and not something that's really understood or known. But there are other rituals that people do practice, even in middle schools, which have like ties to Eastern Europe, like Druid sort of rituals that are completely accepted. It's like not one blink of the eye. So I understand that there is sort of like a basis of understanding that people here might have for certain cultural activities and not others. Or, I mean, it's something to continually experiment with, for sure.
We have time for one last question before we set her free for a while.
You know, at the very beginning, you had the plexiglass box where you had the water in it, and there was something that was flaking. I can't remember the title of that piece, but do you see that work as capturing the Earth's bodily fluids, meaning the water? Have you thought about it in that way, in the reverse?
When I'm actually in Wisconsin, I'm surrounded by water all the time. And I do feel like since coming down to Texas, I've dried up. So water, for me, water is a healing element. And that I do believe in. So when these things are disintegrating, I'm viewing that as them being almost like purified through the powers of water. Both its destructive nature and its supporting.
I just immediately thought it was the Earth's bodily fluids, as other artists have used, like Serrano has used his crisis, something, so I was, not that I'm saying that word compared to that, I'm just thinking in terms of bodily fluids.
Right. Well, the ways that streams and rivers cut through the land, that's things.
Just a real quick observation, Nicolle. If someone were to say your work references regional, cultural, environmental, and global things, would you agree to that, or do you think that's way off? That's something we can talk about.
Oh, that sounds like a large conversation.
Exactly. It's something to think about in the next phase.
Yeah.
So we can continue that conversation with the faculty here in a little bit. So thank you very much.